You're about to discover whether you should be booking your cruises via a cruise agent or in some other way with everything that's going on in cruising at the moment. Hi, I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my cruising tips for travelers. I want to explore what is the best and the right way to be booking your cruises as you look to return to cruising, whenever that may be, whether it's the short term, the medium term, or the long term, and really explore whether you should be booking with a cruise agent or in some other way. There are probably about 5 different ways you could be booking your cruises at the moment, one of which is with a travel agent. So certainly one of the high street travel agents, one of the bricks and mortar travel agents. Secondly, with one of the online portals, the bigger, broader travel agents, so something like Expedia, for example. Or you could be looking perhaps at a very focused cruise online agency. So in the US, you've got something like, for example, vacationstogo.com. In the UK, you've got ROL Cruises. These operate both by telephone and online. You could then perhaps be looking at independent cruise brokers, independent cruise agents, often working for themselves, but part of a bigger group. Or of course, you could be booking with the cruise lines direct. With everything that's going on cruising at the moment and all the uncertainty, I really recommend more than ever, even if you have future cruise credits that you've had from bookings you've done direct with the cruise line itself, that you should really seriously be thinking about working with a cruise agent. So that's particularly an independent cruise agent or one of those bigger groups that do online and telephone calls. So why do I think that is so important? Well, first of all, what's really important to bear in mind is they will give you exactly the same price as you will get from the cruise lines. However, they will give you a whole bunch more service. It's really important to understand that if you book with a cruise agent, you will pay the same as going direct. The cruise lines, unlike perhaps with hotels, don't undercut agents in any way. The agents are really, really, really important to the cruise industry. And certainly as they try and get people back to cruising, the agents are becoming even more important. They're going to rely on the agents to tell the story of cruising, to communicate all the new protocols, and to really try and convince people that they should try cruising. And you can see lots of evidence of this. So for example, the head of Royal Caribbean has started a whole video series where he's talking to agents. I've seen lots of webinars being set up with Virgin Cruises, AMA Waterways, where they're talking directly to agents because they are so fundamentally important and they will never, ever undercut the price that you can get with a cruise agent. In fact, you might find that if you go with a cruise agent, you might get a better deal, because what a lot of the agents do to also encourage people to go with them is they will often bundle in other things. The way the cruise agent earns their income is they get a commission on that sale, and they'll sometimes use some of that commission to add some sweeteners with its extra onboard credit. They might give you certain gifts or different types of incentives to book with them. So you might actually get a sharper and better overall deal because they'll throw much more in. The reason also that's really important to understand is I believe very strongly that we're going to see huge volatility in prices over the coming year or so. Prices haven't really become that volatile yet, but once it all beds in, once the cruise lines know exactly what cruises they can operate, when they're going to operate, the challenge is then going to be filling ships, the ships that they have out there. And there's going to be a lot of reluctance to get back onto ships, and there's going to be lots of deals. Prices, I believe, are going to chop and change. Deals and offers, whether it's upgrades, extra onboard credit, bundling in things like gratuities, Wi-Fi, specialty dining. It's going to become a very volatile and constantly changing world, and it's going to be quite hard as an individual to keep up to date. If you work with an agent, they will be constantly fed the updates on pricing. They'll know the latest deals, what's being added, what's being taken away, and you're going to be much more certain that you're going to get the best deals that are going. The other thing that I believe is really important, which is ongoing, but even in these uncertain times is important, is the agents are also going to be able to guide you in a number of ways. They can also tell you the best time to book. So different promotions may come up, whether it's for solo travelers, families, whatever it is. They're going to know when those promotional periods are or when they're coming up. So they might be able to tell you, look, hold on for a couple of weeks because I know there's a big solo deal which is coming in next month or whatever. The other thing that you can ask the agent to do is track pricing. Again, as I said, I think price is going to be very, very volatile. And if the cruise lines reduce their price, you're not going to know that. If you ask the agent to track that price, if they see the price going down, the cruise lines won't refund you that. But if the agent picks up on that, they can go back and negotiate a better deal. So that's happened to me in the past, for example, where prices have come down and I've been offered then perhaps more onboard credit or often an upgrade. the agent can make sure that they keep on top of pricing as it moves over the place to make sure that you do get extra benefits if the price goes down. The other very important thing with agents is close to sailing, what the cruise lines do is they aim to try and get the ship as full as they possibly can. And what they will do is they'll often do some very big deals. So they might start upgrading people from lower grades, and they'll put some incredible deals out there. Now, they don't want to publicize those. They don't want to go out and advertise those or put them on their website. So they'll often go to trusted cruise agents and try to get them to clear those cabins. So they will also know if there's some really sharp deals. So if you're particularly looking at cruising at short notice, which you might want to do with all the volatility in cruising is only decide close to the time, they're likely to have deals which you will not find anywhere else, even on the cruise line sites. The second absolutely key reason for choosing to go with a cruise agent is around the time saving and the convenience and the fact that it's one call. We've seen huge volatility, and we may keep seeing volatility in cruising. The advantage with an agent is if you want to cancel. So if your cruise is cancelled or you want to shift it or change it. At the moment, if you've booked, say, direct with the cruise line, you basically have to phone them up and you could be waiting for huge amounts of time. The advantage you have if you've got an agent is if the cruise gets cancelled, they will deal with all the hanging on with the cruise lines. If you've booked your whole package to them, so you've perhaps booked some hotels, some flights, with one call, with one message, with one email, then the cruise agent has to deal with all of the refunds, all of the contacts, and it saves you having to hang on to the cruise line, hang on with the airline, get hold of the hotel, cancel excursions, whatever it is. It's one simple point of contact. And certainly talking to agents, I know they have taken a huge amount of stress and strain away because they've been able to do all of that for a client. And that's really, really big plus. The second thing, which is sort of linked to that, is if anything goes wrong on your cruise, again, you just have one point of contact. And that's been great for me in the past. So for example, I was on a cruise not that long ago where the airports went on strike and flights weren't going. And I could see everyone else on the ship who'd booked their packages separately. So they'd perhaps booked the cruise directly with the cruise line. They booked flights separately. They booked hotels separately. And they were then scrabbling around using, sometimes not great Wi-Fi or days at sea to try and contact all these people to move everything around. What I was able to do was actually with a company called Monday Cruising. I was on a Windstar cruise. I just sent an email to the agency, said, look, this has happened, can you sort it out? And then I could just relax, enjoy the next day and wait for them to sort it out. And they eventually came back with me and they sorted out new hotel, new flight time and all that stuff. And I hadn't worried about all that stress. A third really good reason for using a cruise agent is if you have had lots of cruises cancelled and you've actually got future cruise credit because either you've cancelled or moved cruises. The really good news is even if you have future cruise credit, which you've earned from booking direct with the cruise line, a cruise agent will be very, very happy to pick those future cruise credits up as you plan forward. And the reason for that is the cruise lines, again, because the agents are so important to them, are going to be giving commission to the cruise agents when they rebook new cruises with future cruise credit. So future cruise credit is allocated to you as an individual, either with your club number, your captain's number or your frequent cruising number, or with your booking reference, and they are then able to use it. Now, I've checked with agents that I know both in the UK and in the US, and it certainly seems the case that they will then be very, very keen and happy to help you use those future cruise credits because they will again earn the commission from those new bookings, even though originally you booked it directly with the cruise line. And of course, the good news is then I'm also helping support those agents through what have been quite challenging and difficult times and a huge amount of work for them. So that's another really good reason for choosing to use an agent. It's going to simplify the whole process of using future cruise credits. It's a little bit complicated, future cruise credits. Different cruise lines are doing in different ways, in different formats, and you can get rid of all of that worry, all of that stress and strain by basically handing your references over to the agent and let them get on with it. Another really good reason for using an agent is, and I alluded to a little bit earlier, is they're a one-stop shop. As you head back into cruising, one of the things you might want to do is use an agent simply because the rate at which airlines go back, the frequency of itineraries, which hotels open, which ports are open, which excursions are open, which transport companies are open, which cruise lines are running when. It's quite a complicated mishmash of different rules and regulations, travel advisories, and it is going to be quite complicated. The advantage of working with an agent is they can navigate their way through all of that. They can then put together and make sure they can put together one whole program from the time you leave your house to the time you get back, and they can fill in all the gaps and work around all of those different rules, regulations, and changes and make sure that you know what they are. So it's a complete one-stop shop. I think traveling over the next year or so is going to be quite complicated because rules will change, shutdowns will come and go, and ports will be more willing or less willing. And by basically handing that over to someone else to sort out for you as a one-stop shop, I think is going to be a real big plus. They also then pull that together in a nice document. That's the great thing about working with an agent. They put together a nice document with everything laid out, step by step, day by day. So that whole one-stop shop and getting around all this, what's going to be a complicated way of easing back to travel, I think is a big, big reason for using an agent. Of course, one of the most obvious reasons for using an agent is their expertise and their advice, and particularly if you're new to cruise and heading out into this new world of cruising. The agents have lots of experience. They know the ships, they know the cruise lines, and they have worked with lots of people before finding out what really works for different types of travelers. So you actually then are buying a lot of expertise. Of course, there's lots of research you can do yourself, but certainly if you're new to cruise, I think that's a real big plus. But also if you're thinking of changing cruise lines, so perhaps you've been really loyal to a cruise line, with everything that's going on, you're either looking at a different cruise line. Again, using an agent could be a really good way of helping, again, sort you out and get you in the right direction. Another thing which I really like, which is linked to that, is what most agents will do is they will alert you and make sure that you understand all the nuances of that travel. What do I mean by that? You'll often find that agents will give you some sort of checklist. They will point out to you whether you need visas, whether you need vaccinations, whether there's certain things you need to pack, certain things you shouldn't be packing because you're going to a certain region. And they will give you a really good checklist and advice. If you book direct, for example, with a cruise line, they will give you more standard documentations. But an agent is normally pretty good at giving you documentation and pointing out the kind of things you really need to think about because they're giving you much more of a service. And that certainly is if you're heading to a new region or new part of the world, and with everything changing again, with potentially new regulations and rules, having that advice and that guidance and those checklists will be a real big plus and reason for using an agent, I believe. Another good reason for using an agent is, bear in mind, agents want to keep you happy. They want to make sure that you have a great experience because they want you to keep coming back. So actually by handing over a lot of this complicated organization and potentially disruptive organization over to them, they want to keep you happy. They're going to work as hard as they can to make sure they put together something that really works for you, because they want to make sure that you're going to keep coming back and back to them. Now, personally, I think one of the great things to do is to actually work with a more independent cruise agent. And the reason I like to work with an independent cruise agent is then you have one point of contact, so you're always working with that same person. They often are more available because they're working from home often. They have even more flexibility than normal. They'll often be checking in on the weekends or the evenings or whatever. So I really like working with independent agents. With everything going on in travel and cruising, as the world readjusts to the new realities and the way that we work and regulations change and new rules change and the way we travel changes, I think working with an agent at this time is probably more important than any time in the past. So if you haven't worked with an agent before, when you book your cruising, this is the time, I think, to really rethink whether working with an agent is the right thing to do. And hopefully that's given you some insights and thoughts. I've loads more videos full of tips, advice, and recommendations about cruising. So why don't you watch another one of those right now?